President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was an influential American leader who left behind a strong legacy. With his interventionist policies and belief in socialist programs such as Social Security influencing the nation and the world to this day. In the time before FDR's presidency, the world was hit with the First World War, the rise of communism in Russia, and the rise of fascism in places like Italy. During the 1930s, the United States went through the Great Depression, a colossal economic downturn when the U.S. stock market crashed drastically. Born January 30th, 1882, to parents James Roosevelt and Sarah Ann Delano in Hyde Park, New York. The parents both came from wealthy families, the Roosevelts, the Aspinwalls, and Delanos. Roosevelt's father was a prominent Bourbon Democrat, and once took Franklin to meet President Grover Cleveland. He was entirely educated by his parents and private tutors until he was 14 years old. He then began attending Groton. During his time there, the headmaster at Groton, Endicott Peabody, preached Christian values and pushed many students to enter public service. Like most of his classmates at Groton, Franklin ended up going to university at Harvard. He became the editor-in-chief of the Harvard Crimson Daily newspaper, a position which proved his skills in organization and leadership. In 1903, Franklin graduated from Harvard with a Bachelor of Arts degree in history. In 1904, he entered Columbia Law School, only to drop out in 1907 when he passed the New York State bar exam. 1 year later, he took a job with a prestigious law firm. Franklin began courting his cousin, Eleanor Roosevelt. In 1903, he proposed to Eleanor, and after some resistance from his mother Sarah, they got married on March 17, 1905. They moved into Springwood, the Roosevelt estate in Hyde Park, New York, shortly after their wedding. Eleanor never felt at home at Springwood, but did feel at home on Campobello Island, in a home which Franklin's mother gifted the couple. Franklin and Eleanor had 6 children: Anna, James, Elliot, Franklin, and John. Their second son's name was also Franklin, who died in infancy in 1909. Roosevelt didn't care much about law, and would tell his friends that he planned to go into politics. Though he admired his cousin Theodore's passion and ire when it came to politics, he didn't share the same party alignment as him, being an adamant member of the Democratic Party. Before the 1910 elections, the Democratic Party recruited Roosevelt to run for a seat in the New York State Assembly. Roosevelt was a compelling new member to the party, having a big name, standing in opposition to his prominent cousin, and he was able to pay for his own campaign. Roosevelt's campaign for the state assembly ended after the Democrat who had the seat before chose to seek re-election. Instead of putting his political career on hold, Roosevelt instead ran for a seat in the state Senate. Through aggressive campaigning, name recognition, and the Democratic landslide in the U.S. elections in 1910, Roosevelt won a surprising victory. Roosevelt was a strong supporter of President Woodrow Wilson and his ideals, leading to his appointment in March of 1913 as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, the second highest ranking official in the Navy Department. Roosevelt loved the Navy and was well read on subjects regarding it, along with being an advocate for a larger, more efficient Navy. With President Wilson's support, Roosevelt improved the Navy, its policies, and its structures. Roosevelt returned to New York City where he practiced law again. While the Roosevelts were vacationing at Campobello Island in August of 1921, he fell ill. Roosevelt was left paralyzed from the waist down and was diagnosed with polio. Though quite still ill, he became governor of New York in 1928. When the presidential election in 1932 was approaching, FDR put together a brain trust of policy advisors, primarily made up of professors from prestigious schools like Columbia and Harvard. Most people didn't really believe in his chances. Roosevelt won a landslide victory in the Electoral College. In his acceptance speech, Roosevelt promised a New Deal for the American people. Roosevelt began to implement new policies that helped the economy during the Great Depression, such as Social Security and welfare. After the start of his third term, the U.S. was swiftly plunged into the Second World War. Roosevelt was already a supporter of a larger, efficient Navy and didn't mind having a large army either. FDR began the rearmament, or the growth of the military in preparation for war. While Roosevelt always wanted to join the war, he knew it would take a spark in the powder. The rest of the world's major powers from the First World War and more had already been pulled into the conflict, while the U.S. tried to avoid direct conflict as they had pulled back from world politics. They did have a Lend-Lease, where they didn't sell supplies to the Allies as that was prohibited, but rather lent it to them. Pearl Harbor finally pushed the U.S. over the edge. They declared war on the Axis powers. During the war, Roosevelt and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Winston Churchill, had many meetings over the strategy for taking back France and other plans such as invasions of Greece and Italy. D-Day, or Operation Overlord, was a joint invasion by Allied forces into northern France, being directed primarily towards the shores of Normandy. Another invasion of France followed, in hopes of bolstering Overlord, that was directed towards the south of France. It was primarily Roosevelt's plan after the progress of Overlord stalled. During this time there was also fighting in the Pacific with Japan, and in support of the Chinese, who were also fighting the Japanese. The fight in the Pacific primarily used the Navy he bolstered the strength of during his time as Assistant Secretary of the Navy and during his presidency. FDR was a chain smoker nearly his whole life, causing him to suffer from heart issues in his later life that were only made worse by his other health conditions. On April 12, 1945, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt died of an intracerebral hemorrhage in his little white house in Warm Springs, Georgia. While before his presidency the United States was more offhands with its citizens, it became much more personal during the time as president, leaving behind New Deal policies and socialist ideas through Social Security and welfare. He also left an impact with his interventionist policies, as the U.S. barely got involved in any world affairs before World War II, then after we were involved in conflicts such as Vietnam, the Korean War, and the Gulf Wars. This is why President Franklin D. Roosevelt was a strong American leader with a long-lasting legacy.